Good afternoon, everybody. I am Captain Jim Palmer, the Dream Business Coach. I am the founder of the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program, creator of No Hassle Newsletters, the Done For You newsletter program used by over 1,200 small business owners. I'm also the host of Dream Business Radio, my weekly podcast created to help you build your dream business. This is episode 570. My special guest this week is franchise strategist extraordinaire. I'm putting that word in there, April Porter. April, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. Really excited to have you on. Hey, before we jump in, folks, this episode of Dream Business Radio is brought to you by the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program. If you're an entrepreneur who wants to grow a more profitable business faster, if you're looking to create multiple streams of revenue, you want to check out this extraordinary virtual mastermind led by me, Captain Jim Palmer, at dreambizcoaching.com, dreambizcoaching.com. By the way, at the end of the show, I'm going to tell you how you can get all of my books for free in digital download from Amazon. Yes, I figured that out. Super big deal to get something for free on Amazon. At the end of the show, I am going to show you that. One thing I want to show you right now. So actually just yesterday, we released a new ebook, The Top 3 Benefits of Creating Your Own Virtual Mastermind. Over the last 13 years, I've perfected how to do this virtually, and I detail exactly how I did that. You can get a copy of this report at lucrativevirtualmastermind.com, lucrativevirtualmastermind.com. All right, let me introduce April. We'll dive right in. I'm super excited because not only is she a franchise expert, and I used to be in the franchise business, but she's a great business building expert as well. So officially, April Porter is a franchise empire building strategist, an award-winning multi-unit franchisee, attorney, and CEO of Ask April Porter. April has been named a top influencer in the global franchising industry. She hosts the #1 franchise podcast on Apple, the Infinite Franchisee Show, and she received the Chairman's Award for Distinguished Service to the franchise industry from the AAFD. April fills the gap. That's an expression I want you to think how many times we're going to use that. April fills the gap between the franchise model and the ultimate success by providing franchisees the strategies needed to increase profits, build reliable teams, and scale to multiple locations, bringing underperforming franchisees to top performers and top performers to multi-unit owners. So that's what every franchisee wants, to reach a life of a swag, as they say, sanity, wealth, and gratitude. So April, once again, welcome to Dream Business Radio.
Thank you so much.
So, when we met, I was really excited. I told you, as I tell most people, I think I'm up to 160 applications to be on the show, which is weekly. So there's only so many. So, but I saw Ask April Porter. I was a little intrigued. Then I saw the franchise business. I spent probably 5 years helping to grow a brand new franchise to 80 units. So I kind of dug in. And then when we met, I was like, holy crap, you've got such an amazing story. Because if you haven't seen my interviews yet, you're going to know, God, Jim's questions are like this long. But anyway, so I was telling you right before we went on the air, a lot of people that listen to the show for 10 years love the inspiration and the journey as much as the great tips and strategies. So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to be where you are today? Because I mentioned attorney and all kinds of things.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a kind of maze, I guess, as to how I got where I am. And it's so funny because people will say, oh, you have such an interesting story. And I think that when you hear that as a business owner, many times you don't really acknowledge or recognize how much you've done because you lived it, right? It's like, oh, it's not that interesting to me. It's just was getting up every morning, doing what needed to be done. But so I started my career as an assistant prosecuting attorney, also known as district attorney in some areas. And my specialty was prosecuting crimes of violent nature. So it was all sexual assaults, child abuse, and homicides.
And when you say prosecutor, you're in the courtroom prosecuting the bad people.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. So I was in trial all the time. Because those particular cases, people don't want to plead guilty to, even if they are guilty, because obviously you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison and everyone's going to know that you did that, your family and friends. So I had a lot of trials. And I did that over 10 years. And as you can imagine, the subject matter was at times very heavy
Yeah.
and stressful. And I really loved that job, but I also, quite frankly, I had a boss that made life even more difficult. And it was like, ugh, I can't do both, right? I could have a terrible boss with great subject matter or terrible subject matter with a great boss, but can't do both.
Hmm.
So that's when I started to look at what's next. But I'll have to tell you, Jim, after being a prosecutor of those types of crimes, the thought of going to sit behind a desk and read contracts as an attorney is
How
just
boring that would be. Yeah.
mind numbing. Yes. So I started to look at what other opportunities were out there, and I saw that across the state, because I'm here in Missouri, so on the Kansas
Okay.
City side, friends had opened a new kickboxing gym, and man, it looked fun. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would be a member at that gym if it existed here in St. Louis. And one thing led to another, and I started to look into franchising it and found out we could be the first and only one here in St.
Oh,
Louis.
wow.
And so
Had you kickboxed before, or is this just something that was interesting to you?
no, I had kickbox before, and I grew up a competitive dancer, which it's very similar. You have to
Hmm.
know where every piece of your body is and be very strong and those types of things. And I had taught dance and then transitioned into teaching fitness. So I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. We have a million side gigs before we
Yes.
really jump into business ownership. So that's what led me to the kickboxing. And so we looked at the opportunity, and I looked at where I wanted that business to take me.
Hmm.
And I realized that a single unit or a single location, yes, it would be fun, but it wouldn't really take us to the income that we wanted
Right.
or real freedom. So we decided, with no business experience, to sign 3 franchise agreements. And at the time, I did it thinking, well, that's the whole point of a franchise, right? I open one, then the franchisor is going to teach me how to be a business owner.
Sure.
And then that didn't turn out to be the case.
Were you
Um,
still a assistant district attorney and doing this on the side, or did you leave that?
I signed the agreements. I left the prosecutor's office.
Hmm.
And at that time, I also took a municipal judgeship. So, so I was a municipal judge for 7 years, and I did that in the evening
Hmm.
and grew my kickboxing gyms the rest of the time.
Wow. Oh my gosh. It occurs to me when you're prosecuting all these horrible crimes. A good friend of mine was an oncology nurse for like 15 or 18 years and ultimately left because just every day was
Mhm.
that must have been very difficult, I would think, unless I don't want to say you enjoyed putting people in jail, but I mean, those are some horrific crimes, right?
The difficult part, yes, the difficult part was not putting people in jail, although that may sound callous.
Hmm.
Um, it's because my job was literally meeting with victims and making them recount what was probably
Oh,
the
yeah.
worst time of their lives.
Hmm.
And then I knew that if I put them on the stand, there was going to be a defense attorney who was trying to convince 12 people sitting in the jury box that that person was just a pure liar.
Hmm.
And so now not only do I have to make them relive it, but I have to allow the defense attorney to basically paint a picture of them as a liar. And then I have to try to overcome that.
Hmm.
And so that, and then even if we won, like when we would get guilty verdicts, a lot of times the judge would not put a sentence in place that felt like true justice was being served.
Right.
So it just was a lot of like, it didn't feel like we were on necessarily the good side of things at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Was your just curious if your parents were, because I've interviewed so many people, whether they put themselves through school, mom and dad helps, they come out with their CPA degree. Yeah, I don't want to be an accountant. I don't like numbers. I think I'm going to be a trained engineer or something. I don't know where I came up with that. So you go and you be a very
Mhm,
successful prosecutor and all this and that, and now you're going to run a kickboxing gym. What did your
mhm.
family think?
Um, well, I was very fortunate where my I had a lot scholarships that got me through school. So there
Okay.
wasn't a whole lot of judgment around me not using my degree. And my dad is very entrepreneurial. My parents owned a restaurant when they first got married, and it was a franchise. And then my dad ended up starting his own business later in life as well. So he, of course, had a lot of advice to give, more so than
Sure.
judgment.
Yep.
But
I'm sure he was rallying in your corner from the entrepreneurial spirit. So,
yeah,
so April, so you sign a deal for 3, not just 1, and we'll see how it goes. You sign for 3, and as much as it takes hourly wise and energy wise to get into business for yourself, you say, well, I'm going to be a judge at night. I'm sure there's rent to be paid. So you're a judge. When did you sleep? What was that like?
well, I'll tell you, for the first 3 months, I think I was sleeping on my feet with my eyes open, to be
Yeah.
honest. It was the only thing I can compare it to, and I don't have any children, but it seemed like we had a newborn with the amount of exhaustion I felt. But luckily for us, I keep saying us because technically my husband had signed the agreements, but really he worked another job and didn't have
Okay.
anything to do with the business. But within 3 months, we were profitable in our first location. And then I started hiring. And that's when I was able to start pulling back a little bit. But it was at that moment that I was like, oh, okay, I don't know how I'm going to be in 3 places at once, right?
Yeah. When I was reading your bio, way more than I read, but I knew I'd get it anyway during the interview. Anyway, there was a point where you discovered that a lot of franchisees, and by the way, folks, franchisee is the franchise operator, franchisor is the parent company. The franchisees were not successful. So did you realize when you started being successful, maybe you went to regional meetings, national conferences, and people go, oh my God, this sucks. And you're like doing really well. Was that the epitome or?
Well, what had happened is as I was getting going in the system, the franchisor actually had a PR company that was helping
Okay.
raise brand awareness nationally. And the PR company was calling to put me on news segments and specialty interviews, and articles were being written about me as one of the successful franchisees.
Okay.
And then they were asking me to take calls from people who wanted to invest in the franchise and validate that the franchise was working for me. And so all of that was happening. And then, yes, going to the conferences and meeting other franchisees and just talking about what was going on in people's businesses. And then that's when the calls started rolling in from other franchisees, like, 5, 7 calls a week saying, hey, will you walk me through what you're doing?
Wow. So a lot of people that get into the coaching space or whatever name you want to put on it, they have no idea, never went to coach. I never went to Coach University, but you got a certain skill set and you've proved yourself, and that's attractive to other people who kind of want to do what you do. Was that a revelation to you? Like people, what they say, oh, can I buy you a ham sandwich and pick your brain? Right. That whole expression. But was that like a real eye opening, or there's so many people call them, here you are trying to run your business, and people are saying, what are you doing? How can you help me?
Yeah, that for me was like when it started to get up to the point where I was spending almost a full day a week on the phone with franchisees. That's when I said, I can't do this for free because I'm running a business and it's taking me away from the business. But if I can leverage it into another revenue stream, that makes sense.
Okay.
So that's when I began holding like workshops with groups of franchisees so that we could get through the content, but then shrink down the amount of time that I was spending on it.
I remember as a franchisor, it's nice because you want your franchisees to do well, but there's also this line where the franchisor who's collecting a fee of some sort, commission or whatever percentage, whatever you want to call it, they want to be seen as the smart person, the support. So if you start upstaging the franchisor whom the local franchisees are paying a percentage of their sales, was that difficult at all for them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It wasn't intended to be. In fact, my intention was, let me run a couple of these workshops and then I'll take what I'm doing and share it with the corporate office and say, hey, we can help more franchisees. These are the results I've been seeing.
Okay.
But they didn't necessarily agree with that for exactly what you're, saying. And
Yeah.
I find that to be true across the board in franchising, which is really what we refer to as the franchising gap. And it is systemic in the whole industry. And what it is that franchisors, the whole industry for years, it's this belief, this like unspoken rule that franchisors provide, quote, everything a person needs to be successful as a business,
Right.
as a franchisee. And the reality is that they provide a proven model. But if you have a person who, their mindset is that of a hobbyist, like, oh, I'm going to keep my full-time job and I'll just dabble in this and it'll suddenly be successful. Or a mindset of an employee, like, okay, well, I'm going to get in and teach kickboxing all day and it's going to be an empire. Well, neither one of those things are going to happen. And the franchisor doesn't have the bandwidth or the budget to go through and say, well, let's figure out where you're at and what you're thinking and how to shift the mindset and what actions you need to put in place specifically to change your leadership style with your team.
Okay.
And so that's a conversation that one of my missions is to get us having as an industry, saying the franchisor does not provide everything you need to be successful. They provide a model that works.
Right.
If you show up as a business owner to work it. Now, it's up to you as a franchisee to bring some business acumen, some leadership skills, some mindset. And if you don't have it, you have to get that somewhere.
Now you were, I was also reading, you were on the board of the Franchise Advisory Council. You were elected president of the Independent Franchise Association. So obviously you're still in the franchise business when all this was going on. Was it just, don't share too much personal, but was there some sort of a boom when the thing blew up? You said, I've got to jettison and I think I can be a coach and help franchisees.
No, actually, it was either our Discovery Day or our training camp, which Discovery Day is just for all of the listeners who aren't familiar, it's a day to vet the franchise before you invest in it.
Okay.
But you meet with the corporate office. And then in training camp, we had a meeting with the corporate office, one of those two. The franchisor said, you need to have an exit strategy day one. And I thought, oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about that. And I'm so grateful that he mentioned it then, because that really motivated us to hit our goals, because we had our eye on the end. So at that moment, I decided I wanted to grow the business for about between 5 and 7 years and sell it.
Okay.
And the thinking behind that was that there's a lot of fitness fads. And it was going to get really popular. And then something new was going to come to town and people would see that and want to go try that. And I knew that was the trend. So I thought if we grow it about 5 years, we'll probably be at the peak of it. And then we'll sell it. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow. That's very smart. My daughter, Jessica, started 10 years ago, the very first franchise booking agency, so to speak, Interview Connections. And I told her, girl, as soon as you prove this concept, you're going to have 100 people copying you, which has happened, So, and I do believe in every business, you climb, then you're really at the top of the hill. Some can keep climbing, but for the most part, you're here. But everything is going to, come down, whether you go back up or not, it's another thing. So you were smart to recognize. I'm just curious, most franchise agreements that I've ever seen are like 10 years. So you kind of peg the 5 to 7 years as the time when you want to get your 3 units as profitable as possible and then sell them.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. By the time we were there, we actually owned 4 units.
Okay.
But then also that was enough padding left on our franchise agreement where it would make it attractive to the next buyer, because they wouldn't have to necessarily sign a whole nother 10 years. They could sign and take over our agreement.
I see. All right. So the sale goes through, and how many, I was going to say how many months, but I'm going to say how many hours before you came up with the Ask April Porter, concept?
It's one of those things. I knew I really just wanted to do April Porter coaching or consulting or something like that, but the URL wasn't available.
Okay.
And I wanted it to be at the top of top of the alphabet. These are tips for anybody who's picking a name of business. I wanted it to be at the top of the alphabet so that if I was ever listed in a directory, I'd be the first coaching or consulting people came across. And it just came to me. I'm like, I should just name it Ask April Porter, because in the franchising world, like within the franchisees and the American Association of Franchisees and Dealers, people were always saying, oh, you should ask April that. You should ask
Oh
April
my
that.
gosh, that's great.
So,
so you were well known in the kickboxing, and then I guess a lot of the shows that I do are about marketing. So then you had to market yourself to the rest of the franchise community. Is that largely who you help, our franchisees?
it's actually, I love this example because it proves the theory of a niche.
Mm-hmm.
We market to franchisees, and about half our clients are franchisees and half are independent business owners.
Interesting. And did you kind of go at it thinking you'd be niched in the franchise, but yet other small business owners said, you seem smart, you can help me too?
Yes.
Wow. Oh, that's pretty cool. So tell me, I know you do a lot of training. In fact, right before we went live, you said you got a webinar coming up. Talk about what do you do to help small business owners? And we can include franchisees in that.
Right. Well, our mission is to really fill that gap, between the model and that vision of success. And we do it in a way where, yes, we make money from it, but that's not our sole purpose.
Okay.
So we have like a Facebook group for franchisee tips and tricks, and it's free, and people can come in and, just ask a question here, whatever you need. And we've got a community of franchise and business owners that want to help. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have free webinars. We do a free large masterclass. We got one coming up in October. That's called the Business Sanity Formula. We have our podcast, which is the Infinite Franchisee. So we're really on a mission again to change the franchising industry and really educate the whole industry on this gap, because ultimately I would love to see the salespeople, the franchise consultants and the salespeople in the industry really being transparent with franchisees about the advantage of getting into a franchise is not that you will learn everything. You've got a responsibility, but it does give you an amazing kickstart because a lot of the headaches are taken care of for you.
There was the franchise I was in, one of our franchises, he was about 2 hours from our corporate office. He was always pitching a fit. Oh, he's bitching about slow sales. And I decided we used to employ mystery shoppers back in the day, right? Well, I decided I'm going to go out and his name was not Bill. I'll call him Bill. Not that he'd be watching me today. So I drove out to Bill, and I was just going to walk in and sort of mystery shop, although he'd know it was me when I walked in. Bill is sitting in the back watching the baseball game. He's not working the store, not doing whatever needs to, and not making phone calls, not doing anything. He was watching. Said, "Wow, that's interesting." Anyway, that was kind of, I don't know how I brought that. So listen, folks, I want you to know askaprilporter.com is the website. It's a really good blog. You all know that's how I prepare for interviews. I want to ask you about 2 blog posts, April. Hopefully it's not putting you on the spot too much. One was, what is choking the life out of your business? I think that was one of the blog posts. Give us a 2-minute version of that.
Oh my gosh. I talk about so many different things. I could have probably pulled anything out of a hat and given it that title, but, probably what's choking the life out of your business, I would say, is, fear.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's this fear of doing the wrong thing that makes us, like paralyzed, or it's
you talked about, I'm going to help you out. You talked about the stranglehold of fear, right?
Yeah.
That it's planted on the vine, and I'm a total believer in that, because I'm all about the mindset as well. So if that helps you a little bit.
Yeah. So what happens is we take this big risk to become business owners, right? And that's honestly your bravest day as a business owner, is to saying yes, signing on the dotted line, whether it's a lease or a franchise or the inventory purchase or whatever it is that makes you really open your doors. And then from that moment, many business owners fall into this fear that it's not going to work. It's, like now, oh my gosh, if I invest in this, then I won't have as much money in my bank account and I won't be able to pay for something else I need. Right.
Limited beliefs. Yeah.
Total limited beliefs. It's total constant fear to the point where we aren't even aware of it as fear any longer. It's just like, I'm making good decisions because I'm not spending my money, and we can justify it. And it's anytime you're stuck in fear instead of hope or joy, anytime you're making a decision out of fear instead of opportunity and investment, you are sliding backwards. You are dying a slow death.
I don't know. If you've worked with, I'm sure you have. I think there's the initial, as you say, the initial joy when you open the business. And then I think the business starts to mature as the business owner would. I wrote this blog many years ago called, I forget the exact title, but I was talking about bringing back the childlike enthusiasm. Because if you grow, let's say you grow a business and maybe you're doing $500,000 or $1 million a year, you're 10 years in, you have staff, you have now we have overhead and stuff, and you see this opportunity to do something spectacular. I don't know, open kickboxing or do something else on the side but you don't do it because you say, I don't want to disturb or put at risk what I have now, which is the risk assessment. Is the whole part of being not an entrepreneur, right? You risk here, but then you get to a point and I'm like, well, why did you lose that? Where did that, childhood enthusiasm go? Do you find that to be true?
Oh, 100%. And I think it comes in when people actually put on that business owner hat and they realize all the different expertise that you need to juggle as a business owner, and that your expertise really lies most likely in the product or service and in the delivery of that to the customer. And so it's like all of a sudden you're in a room of mirrors and all these mirrors are showing you how inadequate you are. And there's one mirror that says, but you got this one thing, you're really good at your product or service, and you're just outnumbered at that point in time. Then you're outnumbered by the mirrors that are telling you, yeah, but you don't know how to market. You don't know how to do your business books. You didn't know to register with that department with the state. And now you have,
that's right.
All those different things like that.
We got about 3 or 4 more minutes. And I love the interview, by the way. 3 or 4 more minutes. There's one other blog post. Let's see. It was about the secret to creating more time. That particularly caught my attention because I think so many entrepreneurs are just time starved. So do you remember that one?
Oh gosh. We create so much content, Jim, but I can wing it.
Okay.
So if we don't treat it like a quiz, I can give some great advice about creating more time. The creating more time is really about, 2 things. Number one, as long as you're living in a state of chaos, everything feels urgent. Everything feels like it needs your attention right now. And when you have that heightened sense of like everything's urgent, then it feels like you don't have, obviously it puts the pressure. You don't have time to do it. So one is finding ways to bring that chaos down, bring more sanity into your life, and that starts to stretch your time. As a business owner, that the key to that is really starting to learn how to, obviously you guys have probably heard this a million times, but how to delegate and how to lift yourself out of the day-to-day and start to think more strategically. And when you do that, it's amazing. There's a lot of components. You got to trust your team to take things over for you. So there's trust component, all of those things. But great. But I can't remember exactly what that one was about. It might have, I think, had a boat involved in it. And
then I got to go back and read it completely. No. I think Peg, one of my members of my mastermind, was because I lived in that boat for 5 years, so that was the whole reference there. But oh my gosh, April, I could talk to you for another half an hour. I'll have to get you back someday. How can people connect with you? Pretty easy. Ask April Porter, unless you want to give somewhere else.
No, Ask April Porter. And you can find me basically anywhere under Ask, search Ask April Porter on any platform and you'll find us.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today, April.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be on.
Hey, folks, that wraps up this very special interview with my guest, April Porter. And remember, you can connect with her at askaprilporter.com. Super duper blog post. That's one of my benchmarks. If somebody wants to be on the show, I'll look at their website and sometimes, okay, it's okay. But I'll look at the blog post. If the last blog post was like April of 2017. I'm not a real serious marketer. April's got a ton of good content up there. So go check her out at askaprilporter.com. You can connect with me, by the way, at getjimpalmer.com, getjimpalmer.com. Remember, if you're interested in joining me and about 24 other very smart entrepreneurs in the Dream Business Mastermind, you can go to dreambizcoaching.com, dreambizcoaching.com. Okay, now you can get free copies of all 6 of my books at Amazon, obviously as Kindle. They're in the iBook store, and they're also on Barnes & Noble as Nook books. And once again, the final reminder, you can get the top 3 benefits to creating your own virtual lucrative mastermind. I share the whole story about how I did it. Free report. You can get that at lucrativevirtualmastermind.com. But that's it. Until this time next week, another fantastic interview. I am Captain Jim Palmer. I'm the Dream Business Coach, and you take good care.